It is 7 o'clock. Is everyone ready to get counted in?
I'm ready.
Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right, I'll count you in. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cue.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to tonight's Monday, February 28th, 2022 virtual regular meeting at 7 p.m. of the Livermore City Council. I'd like to now call the meeting to order, and can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Carling.
Here.
Councilmember Kick. Here. Councilmember Monroe.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bonanno.
Here.
Mayor Warner.
Here. Please join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we did have a closed session earlier this evening. I would ask the city attorney to please report out any action we may have taken.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is Jason Alcala, your city attorney. I do have a report out this evening pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.1 subsection A. I am reporting that in the closed session meeting for the matter of Deanna Gonzalez versus the city of Livermore, the city council unanimously voted to accept the settlement and a release agreement signed by the plaintiff to release the city of Livermore in exchange for a payment in the amount of $200,000. That case involved allegations arising from a trip and fall on a raised sidewalk. That action authorizes myself as the city attorney and staff to take all necessary actions to implement the settlement agreement. That concludes my report, and no other reportable action was taken in closed session.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go on now to proclamations and presentations. I wanted to point out to people that the way to participate in the meeting is at the end of the agenda. And before we open up public forum, the city clerk will remind everybody of how to participate. So at this point, we're going to start with the Library Board of Trustees annual update provided by 2021 Library Board of Trustees Chair Art Ponto. This is item 3.1.
Good evening, council and public. I'm glad to be here. First off, I just want to thank you, council, for doing such a great job running our city. A lot of tough work you do, and I'm here to bring you some good news this evening. Alan, can you set up the slides, please? Or maybe it's great. Okay, so let's go on to this the second slide. So here's a quick overview. The second thing I want to do, the other people I want to thank besides the council are the staff of the Livermore Public Library. They've done a fantastic job this past year. In the space of just a little over a year, they've had 3 directors. They've operated through the pandemic. They've opened and closed the library, set up curbside pickup, lots of different rule changes, and all through this, they've done just a wonderful job of serving our community. So if you see a Livermore Public Library staff or the leadership as well, please express your thanks. This presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the board, who we are and what we do. We have a new library director that's really exciting, and I'll talk about him just a little bit. I'll reiterate what's happening with our strategic services plan, a couple of examples of how we're implementing that, and talk about the COVID-19 safe operations, and the best part of the talk will be the highlights about some of the great stuff that's going on in the library and is going on this month and next. So on to the next slide, please. The library board is an advisory group. There's 5 of us who recommend policy to the city council. Practically speaking, what we mostly do is we're independent of the city staff, but we help set goals and objectives working with the library director for library services and programs. We had 3 changes in our board membership just in a couple of months this year. And I want to thank all of the members, especially Matt Berry, who served on our library board for over 10 years and is still part of the Friends of Livermore Library, helping to make this this library a great place for the community. We have monthly meetings that are open to the public, and we talk about strategic planning, patron policies, programs, and services. Next slide, please. Here are the current board members. I've just stepped down as chair. Rich Hunt, we elected him as chair just last month. I've got a little over a year on the board. It's time for me to play a more supporting role here. Two new members, Julie LeBlanc and Lainey Pascal, have joined us and are working hard. And Minnie Chopra has been our vice chair for a while. Let's move ahead. Next slide. Anwan Baker is our library services director. I was about to say new, but he's been with us for about 6 months. Our former library services director, Tamara LeBeau, retired in December of 2020. And Nathan Bromley did a fantastic job as interim library services director for about 6 months during the search process and recruitment. And I thought the city manager did a nice job of bringing in interview folks to support the interview process. I and other community members were involved. Some library subject matter experts were there, and also parts of his management team. And we gave our recommendations to city manager, and he did a great job of selecting Anwan Baker as our new library services director. He's got quite a diverse bunch of experience from working for as director of the City of Lodi Public Library. He worked in Berkeley, worked in Savannah, Georgia. So he brings a lot of experience to us, and he's really bringing a lot of new ideas to the library. It's wonderful. Next slide. So our library strategic services plan was developed right around the beginning of the pandemic, and has 3 major elements. It's promoting literacy in all its forms, and one of the ways that was done this past year was 138 Storytime home videos were produced for the library's YouTube channel. To affirm equality and inclusion, this year we've got a new all Spanish early learning class that's been popular. And finally, to enable all community members to participate in library services by increasing their awareness and accessibility. And awareness has been enhanced by a monthly e-newsletter, and accessibility with the new online catalog is making it easier for folks to get to the collection. And Director Baker has reaffirmed his commitment to moving this forward and really bringing the strategic services plan alive in the coming years. Next slide. I want to just touch briefly on the operations. All of the library branches and civic center closed on March 17th of 2020. Within a couple of months, and amazing, we had curbside service operating starting in June of 2020 and extending into this past year. Civic Center reopened briefly back in November of 2020, but with the next surge, it had to close back down and then reopened for good about a year ago on February 17th, 2021. Rincon branch is open, the Springtown branch is open, and now they're all operating on pre-pandemic hours, except for Civic Center, which hasn't opened on Sundays yet. And during all of this, and I know we as a large community experience all these different rules and changes, and what you could do and couldn't do and should do and shouldn't do. The staff and the leadership of the library just sort of came through and operated in a very safe and responsible manner. So on to the next slide. We've got some big numbers here. Over 96,000 visitors, almost 100,000 visitors came through the doors. 1 million catalog searches, and 80,000 ebooks borrowed. So the library is up and running, serving the community. Next slide. So there are lots more numbers on this slide, and I'm not going to go through all of them. First one mentions almost 20,000 curbside pickups during this pandemic thing. That's something we had never done before. And it involved a whole lot of changes and processes within the library to make that happen. It's pretty impressive that happened. But the one I want to draw your attention to is this one that's in the red rectangle here at the top of the second bullet in. And that's the 2021 door counts. We count everybody who comes into the Civic Center and the branches. They were down to be just 1/3 of our pre-pandemic numbers. Yet, circulation during 2021 was 90% of 2019 totals. So even though people weren't getting into the library, either because we were closed or because they were cautious about being in public places, we still were able to get books and other materials into people's hands, often electronic materials, at like a 90% level. So we're getting back to our robust numbers of pre-pandemic. So the bottom line there, despite the pandemic, our library continued to serve our community. Next slide. Couple of the highlights, as almost every year, the Livermore Reads Together in the summer reading program. This past year in 2021, I thought it was spectacular. The March trilogy, led by John, the book, graphic novel written by John Lewis and Nate Powell and illustrated by Andrew Aiden, was a tremendous selection for last year. And we had a lot of very interesting programming, and especially John Lewis's co-author and the illustrator were joined us by Zoom, and we got a chance to talk with them about the process of creating the book and just what John Lewis was like to work with. Just spectacular, fantastic program. And then next slide, we've got a little bit on the summer reading program, and that was changed too, of course, with the pandemic. And in this case, we started out thinking, well, maybe we could get the entire community together and read 500,000 minutes. Well, that we went by that just less than a month and set a new goal of 2 million minutes. And by the end of the summer, that was surpassed too. And a couple of things I really liked about the new version of the summer reading program is that it really was an attempt to extend it to adults, not just pre-readers and kids. And one of the things that was emphasized was trying to engage high school students and middle school students. And I think the tracking of minutes by school started to build up a little bit of rivalry and enthusiasm. So I'm looking forward to us doing that sort of thing again this coming year. And again, even with the pandemic, there were 181 programs held across all the different age groups. So the summer reading program, and I can remember for years back, it's always been a great thing for the community during the summer. The library's done well, and it's part of Livermore's personality, I think. Next slide. So I was first slated to give this talk back in January, and that I could have told you about what was coming up in February and March, but February has already happened. And this year, I think partly because of the great success of the Livermore Reads Together last year in the March trilogy, we've done a Black History Month program. And there's been a very robust program of different activities during the month. And some of them recorded. So hopefully if you missed some of the very interesting programs, and you can go back and catch them online. And then coming up this in March is the Livermore Reads Together for this year. And this looks like a very interesting book sort of broaden our perspective as well. It's called The Reason I Jump, and it's the inner voice of a 13-year-old boy with autism. And I think our society is becoming more aware of the autism spectrum and just how many people are affected by it, either by dealing with it personally or having family members and friends. So to sum up the entire talk, again, I want to express my hearty thanks to the leadership and the staff of the library who've brought us wonderful service again this year. And we're back, and lots of good stuff. And so if you get a chance to visit the library in person or online, look for all the great new things that are going on. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. It's certainly an impressive amount of stuff you've done, especially under the difficult circumstances. Really appreciate everything you and the board do to make our library as great as it is. So wonderful bit of work and a very nice report out, very comprehensive. So thank you. I see all my fellow council members want to say things as well. So we'll start down that. I'll figure out who's in what order here in a second. Let's see, Vice Mayor Bonanno.
Yes, thank you, Art. Really appreciate your update. And it's hard to imagine how many things in the community that everyone could agree on, but how much everybody loves the libraries, I suspect is the one thing we could all agree on without much controversy. Really appreciate everything you guys did. I love your strategic goals. I love to see goals that are just really clear and concise and very powerful, and they carry the message just really beautifully. And I think from my standpoint anyway, those are the things that a library should endeavor to do. And I think I can't think of a library system that could possibly do it better than you all do. So thank you to your staff, to the board, to your staff, to our new director, Baker. Just think what you were able to accomplish during COVID was really amazing. It's such an important asset for the community, especially in challenging times like this. I just can't say enough about how great I think you serve the community. And I want to give a shout out to my ex-father-in-law, who's since passed. Not my ex-father-in-law, he's still my father-in-law, but he has passed away. Frank Cupp, who's also an ex-Sandian, who recruited me to join the library board, which is the first assignment I had working for the city quite a long time ago. And I think he was so proud of the library. He worked so hard. He was on the library board for as many terms as they'd have him. And he'd be so proud. His name is actually one of the people that are on the plaque in front of the new library. And I know how proud he would be to see everything that the library's accomplished since his time supporting it. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, Councilmember Monroe.
Well, I would echo all of what Vice Mayor Bonanno just said. And I wanted to add to that a personal reflection, which is that part of the reason we moved from Pleasanton to Livermore, these many decades ago, was the library. It wasn't the first reason, but it was the fact that this community valued the library so much, mattered a lot to us. And there's nothing about that that's changed over the years. Your discussion of the last year or so just brought back personal memories of being sad when the library closed, being so happy to walk back into that space, being one of the people that used the online services, working to, in this role, to encourage movement to, from Civic Center, which I think is one of the hearts of this community, the community gathering place, because we're all people. Communities are just people. The library is where people come. To move that also as well to what we do at Rincon, what we do in Springtown, and then what we do out in the community. You guys do a wonderful, wonderful job. And when I say you guys, I mean all y'all folks who are staff, who are on the board, just who are support. Wonderful. And then finally, just the work of one of the things that happened when the Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee ended was we talked about going forward into the future. And the library holds a lot of that. It's a culture keeper. And that means a culture, what it will be, has been doing and will continue to do is to expand, hang on to what we have and expand that into the future. And I just look forward to seeing where that's going. So thank you so much for this report. This has been a hard week for the world. This just gives a spark of light going forward.
Councilmember Carling.
Yes, thank you, Art. I agree. I just wanted to speak personally. One is the report was very, very well done. And I just want to say how much I think we all appreciate the service that you've given to the library over this period of time. And certainly your enthusiasm for the library is very evident in the report that you gave. So thanks to you and the rest of the board, our new director, Anwan Baker, and all of the folks that make it the thriving place that it is. Appreciate your endeavors and all that. Thank you.
Councilmember Kick.
I just wanted to say also that this was a great report. Thank you for all your work. And the library is the place that guaranteed that we would be moving to Livermore. When we were looking at cities, we walked in and we were like, yep, this is the place. We had a very large swath of cities we were looking at. So that was pretty much one of the main reasons. So I did have a question about the early learning classes. I did attend some of the new Spanish language activities with my children, which have been great. My daughter is at Junction K-8 school and my son will be joining her there next year. And I just think it's a really unique opportunity to expand those services, considering we have a dual immersion school in town. And unfortunately, a lot of times those are happening when big kids are in school. So just a shout out to say that I really appreciate that we're doing that. And if there's any information on how we're going to include or continue to include dual language programming as we come out of this pandemic, because hopefully that's coming soon. I would love to hear about it because I think it adds tremendous value to our community.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Art, again, and the board for everything you've done. I mean, it's clear just how beloved the library is here, and it's because of all of the enthusiasm and hard work by everyone and the support. So this is a wonderful result. We should love to have this kind of presentation every council meeting, I think. Anyway, great. So thank you. We're on next to the honoring the 30th anniversary of the Livermore Opera. And I have a proclamation here. You can't read it, but I will go through some of the highlights. So it's honoring the 30th anniversary of the Livermore Valley Opera, February 2022. Whereas a love of opera and a vision to bring quality opera to the Tri-Valley, led by Doug and Raquel Holt to found the Livermore Valley Opera in 1992. And whereas LVO has grown from a small group of devoted volunteers to a professional nonprofit arts organization. And whereas Livermore Valley Opera's mission is to enrich the community by producing world-class operas and foster the careers of professional singers, LVO has undertaken outreach programs to schools, libraries, senior communities, and service clubs. LVO is also very proud of hiring young professional singers, some of whom have gone on to careers with major opera houses in the United States and in Europe. So now, therefore, the City Council of the City of Livermore honors the Livermore Valley Opera upon the occasion of their 30th anniversary, recognizes the contributions of LVO to the Livermore community and the greater Bay Area, and wishes them continued success in the future. So wonderful and great 30 years. So thank you. So we're now that was item 3.2. We're now on to Citizens Forum, item 4.0. And at this point, the City Clerk, would you please explain the process for participating in tonight's meeting?
Yes, Mayor. City Council's agenda provides opportunities for the public to participate in the meeting by addressing the City Council in the following ways. First, for non-agendized items, the public has the opportunity during Citizens Forum to address the City Council on any item of interest that is within the City Council's subject matter jurisdiction. And two, agendized items, the public can address the City Council on each item of business it considers when the mayor opens public comment and should be focused on that particular item. Please note, a speaker is not required to answer any questions from the City Council, and the City Council is not required to answer any questions from the public. However, the mayor has the discretion to ask staff to address the speaker's comments when a council member believes it is relevant to a particular business item. And participating in this portion of tonight's meeting, one comment may be given per person, per item. Members of the public can participate by using the raise hand feature or *9 if calling in when the item begins. Please do not wait until the public comment period opens for each item to raise your hand. Instead, raise your hand now. Once public comment opens, each participant's name will be announced and their 3 minutes will begin upon being unmuted. The mayor will announce the conclusion of the public comment period after comments have been voiced into the record. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to be starting the Citizens Forum at around 7:30. So we'll go until 8 o'clock if we need to, and then continue anything else beyond that time. That's the first 30 minutes. So, and the City Clerk will announce when there's 5 minutes remaining. And at this point, could we now have the first speakers? I'll open the public Citizens Forum.
Yes, Mayor. The first request to speak is from Mr. Moreno, followed by Doug Mann and Alan Marley. Mr. Moreno, please unmute yourself.
Hello. Hello.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I'd like to address, this is about accountability, specifically Council Member Patricia Monroe. I came across a couple of Facebook posts recently where she makes reference to the COVID-19 vaccine. I found it a little alarming because she goes on to say that, to quote her, just as it is important to push back in the political arena against this kind of talk, free speech, AKA you aren't the boss of me, it's important to push back in the religious arena. And she was in a conversation with Christy Wang, board member, Livermore School District. Basically, she goes on to say that she would push back against religious right and free speech. I found that a little alarming since she took an oath to preserve that in public service. So, you know, it doesn't sound like an American value. I was also told that she was in a, she was told about a sign that was posted up by parents on the corner of Isabel and Concan, she took down, and it was "Unmask Our Children, Parents for Choice." I found that a little bit shameful too, especially when you guys have graffiti all alongside the 580 corridor near In-N-Out that says "Welcome to Gangland," right behind the post office. But, you know, she was real fast to go take down the "Unmask Our Children, Parents for Choice." But why isn't she so fast to take down that ugly "Welcome to Livermore, Gangland" sign of constant graffiti and trash? You know, so that's what I'm calling for, accountability. And you know what, Patricia Monroe, I don't think you're fit for public service if those are your views and if those are the actions you're going to take against parents for choice to unmask their children. Maybe you love your mask, but I don't love the mask on my kids. Thank you.
Next request to speak is from Doug Mann, followed by Alan Marling and Carl Wente. Doug Mann, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Council. First, I'd like to say that I do hope that all of our City Council members, including Councilmember Monroe, continue to inform the public about safe practices during COVID-19. It's not always easy to do, but I appreciate everything that our elected officials do to help keep all of our residents safe. Second, I would like council to take action. Perhaps you need to put it on an agenda item or have staff draw up something for you to take action on regarding Russia's attack on Ukraine. Of course, we're all absolutely devastated and just quite shocked by what Russia is doing. I don't know the current state of our interactions with Snezhinsk, but I would expect that we demand accountability from them if they would be so kind as to make a strong statement to explain themselves and perhaps, well, I think you know where I'm going on it. It's not right. But what I really came to talk about was that I would like an item put on a future agenda, hopefully the next City Council meeting, discussion item, to reevaluate our participation or just reevaluate the Valley Link train as a whole. I have been very skeptical of the benefit of the Valley Link train to Livermore residents ever since it was conceived. It's not real BART. It's not the same thing as BART, yet it seems to have momentum. Yes, I know that, and we've spent, well, not we, but MTC decided it was a good idea to spend $40 million on studying it, just like, I mean, the BART to Livermore. Our Measure B funds were spent about the same number to do a study on that train, and it never arrived. I think that if you did a poll to ask Livermore residents, would you rather fix the streets or would you rather build a train from Stockton to Dublin, I think you'd get a pretty strong answer in favor of the former. So we need to talk about Valley Link. Valley Link is not something that Livermore residents have come to. Is that for me? Valley Link came from Haggerty and Marchand and insiders who don't really know what the residents want. Thank you.
Next request to speak is from Alan Marling, followed by Carl Wente. Alan Marling, please unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. I briefly wanted to thank the library. The library is responsible for some great community building, and also I wanted to congratulate Livermore Valley Opera for so many years of service. I believe my family participated in that when I was younger. Now, the primary thing I wanted to say was at the grocery store today, I was alarmed to see so many people maskless. It took me a beat to realize that eschewing protective equipment indoors is now technically legal. The good news is that we're still free to wear masks. They're common courtesy to keep our neighbors safe. In early February, 3,000 US citizens were dying a day to COVID. Now, a similar number died in the tragedy of 9/11, and I was told never to forget their loss. It's eerie to me to see far more Americans die agonizing deaths to far less national outrage. Worse, COVID preys on the most vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, and people of color who have the most reason to distrust the medical establishment. If we can't even wear a piece of cloth over our face to protect those who most need our help, we aren't a functional society. Vaccinations are another critical safeguard. Though Alameda County has a high rate of people who are protected with the first two shots, it's the booster that's the real winner. The third shot is what will keep your friends and family safe And I hope city staff will continue to encourage people to get it. And I hope we continue with maybe a new form of mask advocacy. For the last matter, the prior speaker mentioned the Valley Link train, and I admit I've not heard of it before, but after commuting in 580 once and far too often, I really, really hate the driving commute. And rather than try to improve the roads, which is always an exercise in futility, I would like to see more money put into trains. Now, it is a difficult time for public transportation with COVID. People are hesitant to ride them, but if there is a path forward for us in California, it has to be with more public transport, not with just beating our head against the asphalt in terms of trying to add lanes to the freeway, which mathematically is going to fail us. Thank you, City Council, for your work.
The next request to speak is from Carl Winty. Carl Winty, please unmute yourself. Carl Winty, please unmute yourself.
Hello. I've unmuted. Hello.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
God, I was halfway through the talk. Hello, everybody, city staff, council. Thank you all for what you do, elected officials, stepping up and serving of the people, by the people, for the people. The wonderful, phenomenal staff that the city of Livermore has. They listen, they're responsive, they're there, they care deeply about the community. To the library, awesome piece of what you do. I had the pleasure of meeting the new library director this past week, and a fine gentleman, and look forward to getting to know you more. And then just all the way through the city staff, just continue to see awesome people that want to help and care so deeply about the community. Mr. Mark Roberts, very sorry to see you go, but excited to see the next generation of folk coming in and making our city the most awesome place to be. The city staff that goes into putting together 465-page packet for this, and to the council that has to read 465-page packet and all the information that goes in there that shows basically how the sausage of government is made. Thank you. Now, I think having a discussion about rail and about Valley Link is a warranted discussion by all means. And I think Mr. Marling said, spoke to the fact that rail, our generation does care about rail. It's not BART, it is Valley Link connecting. And I think there's a deeper, longer term vision where rail is very much needed. So I encourage us to have a healthy discussion about it. What do the citizens of Livermore want? All of the citizens of Livermore, what do they want? Because the people I talk to are very much in favor of Valley Link, are very much in favor of the connection of where it's coming in and having housing and transportation and jobs in a reasonable balance for our society as a whole. So, but that said, anybody that shows up to speak about our government, about our process, and about what happens, I salute you all. So thank you, because this process works. This beautiful experiment of a democratic republic works when people lean in. And we should be very concerned about the fact that Putin just marched his butt into Ukraine, and do everything we can to hold accountable and to support democracy and to support democratic republics of the people, by the people, for the people. Namaste. Thank you again all for what you do, elected and those on city staff. Cheers.
Next request to speak is from Jackie Coda. Jackie Coda, please unmute yourself.
For those of us who have been masked for the last 2 years, your overlords are now allowing you to take off your masks. For those of us who've never worn a mask, happy Monday. It's time for Californians to step up and start pushing back on their bureaucracies. We see our elected officials more concerned about whether or not people are wearing masks indoors, whether or not people have been vaccinated with a genetic experiment, rather than taking care of their cities and their communities. We have leaders within Livermore who are not listening to the citizens of Livermore, who are saying that they do not want any more housing downtown. But our leaders continue to push on for special interest purposes and refuse to listen to the community. It's time for all of us to start recognizing that we have weak leadership in Livermore, as well as very, very weak leadership in California. It's time to stop doing the same thing over and over again, which is the definition of insanity in this insane state of California. It's time for us to make a change. So in this election year, if any of these council members decide to run again, do not vote for them. We need change in Livermore. We need change to make Livermore great again. We need change in California so that our overlords never again decide to try and mandate or dictate our liberties away from us. And for those of you who have bowed down to the overlords, shame on you, suffering from your Stockholm syndrome. Do not cheer that you're able to take your mask off. You should feel ashamed that you ever put one on.
Mayor, there are no more requests to speak.
Thank you, Councilmember Monroe.
Thank you. I simply wanted to correct the record. I was accused of removing a sign. I did make a statement on Facebook that I would look into the issue of the sign. The question was whether it was placed in a legal manner. I actually didn't follow through on that because it was removed by people, I have no idea who, but not me. Prior to that, it is a valid question as to where signs are placed. It is actually my job to look into that, should it be necessary. I've also wanted to make clear that school board member Christy Wong's name is Christy Wong. And the conversation we had was about the need to have the conversation around these issues, not shutting down, increasing free speech, which is, I believe, the subject of the conversation that we're all concerned about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Close citizens forum now. We're on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by the City Council with a single action. Members of the audience who are wishing to provide public input must use the raised hand feature during the public comment period to comment on any of the consent calendar items. At this point, would anybody anyone on the council like to pull any items for discussion? Okay, I don't see any of that. I would, when the time comes for us to vote, I'll just mention on 5.6 on OPEB. At this point, I'll open public comment on the consent calendar. Do we have anybody who wishes to address us on that?
Mayor, no comments have been received.
Okay, I'll close public comment on the consent calendar and then come back to the council. Do we have any a motion? I see Councilmember Monroe.
And I'm jumping the gun. I will make a motion to approve the consent calendar, but I wanted to particularly call out the budget, which is part of this, and to compliment staff for doing a superb job during a time of transition. Excellent work. Thank you so much. And I believe I did move the question as well, or the calendar.
Okay, and Vice Mayor Bonanno.
I'll second both Councilmember Monroe's comments and also the motion.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to highlight on the OPEB that we've made substantial progress over the last year since we said this was an issue we wanted to fix. I wanted to thank staff for fixing it and continuing to make progress. So with that, could we have a roll call on the consent calendar, please?
Councilmember Carling.
Aye.
Councilmember Kay.
Aye.
Councilmember Monroe,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bonanno,
Aye.
Mayor Warner.
Aye, passes unanimously. We're now on to item, 6.0. We don't have any public hearings. So we're on to 7.1, discussion and direction related to the results of public opinion poll for an asset management reserve measure. We have the staff presentation, please.
Honorable Mayor, this is Mark Roberts, your city manager. And I want to, at this time, introduce management analyst Debbie Bell, who will do the introduction to this item before hearing from our pollster.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Debbie Bell, and I work in the Public Works Department and manage the city's asset management program. I'm here tonight to provide results of a recent community input poll, but first I want to briefly set the stage. As you know, asset management has been a council goal and priority since 2015, actually. And over the past 7 years, we've made great progress on this program. We've done a comprehensive review of the condition and needs of our city's infrastructure, developed preliminary cost estimates for repair and replacement efforts, created a citizens-based group to help steer priorities and develop a public awareness campaign, improved our technology and workflow processes, used data-driven information to direct funding to the most critical assets, and we've reduced our funding needs by selling some of our assets and adjusting policies and procedures. Most recently, in September, you directed staff to conduct a public opinion poll to find out what the community thought about providing additional funding to support the asset management program. And I'm going to jump straight to the punchline. Based on the feedback that we received through the survey, staff does not recommend moving forward with any type of a revenue measure. I'm now going to turn this over to Richard Bernard, whose firm FM3 was a sub-consultant on this effort and conducted the public opinion poll. And I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint for Richard to speak to. Let me share my screen.
Thank you, Debbie. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff. I want to thank you for inviting me to present the results of your citizen or resident survey. Before I start, I just wanted you to know that when I first met with the city manager and the city staff, they gave me several instructions. The most important of those instructions was to make sure this was a non-biased survey. Be careful on how I ask the questions so that they are not leading, and that whatever happens, the chips fall where they fall, that the voters will have spoken at the end of the day. And I worked very hard to make sure that that was the case. Next slide. So the key findings from the research: a majority of voters have positive views about the direction of the city. Voters do not perceive there's a great need for additional funding at this time. Opinions are divided about the potential sales tax measure to maintain the quality of life in the city, and the measure does not appear viable at this time. Educational statements about the need for a sales tax and critical statements opposing one did not really move voters appreciably in any direction at the end of the survey. Next slide, please. I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about the sample methodology, and why that's important is that who you sample may have an impact on the results of each question. In this case, my charge was to interview likely November 2022 Livermore city voters, because there was some interest in possibly having some kind of measure placed on that election ballot. And so it made sense to have that universe of voters. We conducted the survey between November 6th and the 14th of 2021. It was a dual mode survey, which means a random part of the respondents were asked to complete the survey on telephone, and a random half were, number of respondents were interviewed via online. For questions asked of everyone, the margin of error is plus or minus 4.9. And in cases where we asked a random half the sample some questions and a random half the other, the margin of error is a little closer to 7 points. Next slide, please. We began by asking if they thought Livermore is generally going in the right direction or if they thought things were going in the wrong direction. A majority, 57%, said right direction, 33% said wrong track, and 10% volunteered they didn't know enough to offer an opinion. Given the climate currently with COVID, with struggles in the economy at the time in November, comparatively to other cities, this is a very good number. You have close to 6 in 10 saying a right direction rather than a wrong track. Next slide, please. Then we asked, in a sense, to get a job performance approval rating of two of different levels of government, the Alameda County Board of Supervisors and the City of Livermore government. We asked them if they approved or disapproved of that particular level of government. The dark blue is strongly approved. The bright blue is somewhat approved. I've aggregated the total approved on the right-hand side. The dull orange is somewhat disapproved. The bright orange is strongly disapprove. And again, I've aggregated the total disapprove on the right-hand side. And folks who just didn't know whether they approved or not volunteered that they didn't know enough to offer an opinion, which was the gray. As you could see, 41% have an approval rating, consider the Alameda County Board of Supervisors in a positive approval sense, and 33 have disapproving views of them. In the case of the City of Livermore government, you're at 56% approval and 34% disapproval. That difference, part of the difference can be explained by the high percentage of folks who don't know enough about the Board of Supervisors. Nonetheless, you have a little shy of a 2-to-1 ratio of approve to disapprove for the City of Livermore government. Next slide, please. And before we get into the actual ballot question, we wanted to ask a conceptual question of if they even think that the city needs additional funds. We took half the sample and asked them about if the city needed additional funds for basic city services, and the other half, random half, asked about repair and maintain infrastructure. And as you can see, slight majority said there was a great or some need for additional funds. A little bit more than a third said a little or no real need for funds in both cases, and 12% in both cases said they didn't know. The great need is very, very modest. It's slightly more than 10%. And if you're thinking about a 50+1 measure or general purpose measure, this is very, very much on the bubble in terms of the perception of need for funds. Next slide, please. And then we presented them with what I'll call as a placeholder, a ballot question, because ultimately it will be the council in conjunction with legal counsel that will decide in the future or never whether what would be placed on the ballot. But we asked a placeholder ballot question, and after presenting the ballot question to them, we said, would you vote yes if there were an election based on this description? Would you vote yes in favor or no to oppose? If they said yes, we asked them, is that definitely yes? So if you can look at the left-hand slide, that's the initial vote. If they said definitely, if they said yes, we said, is that definitely or probably yes? And if they said no, we asked them, is that definitely or probably no, because we want to know the intensity of the opposition. If they were undecided, we asked them, well, would you lean yes or would you lean no? They said they'd lean yes, we put them in the yes camp. If they said they'd lean no, we put them in the no camp. And then in this case, on the initial vote, only 3% said they were still undecided. So on the initial vote, 46% said they would vote yes, 51% said no. And considering the margin of error is slightly less than 5 for simple math, it's pretty much of a dead heat there. It's on the bubble in terms of whether this would be viable, but that definitely yes is particularly low on initial vote for a 50+1, with 22% saying definitely yes, where you have almost 4 in 10 saying definitely no. And then we provided them with some information. As you know, the city cannot advocate, so we provided them with educational information, what the money could be used for. You couldn't promise exactly because it's a general purpose measure, and that's what the law tells us. And we also suggested that the money could be used for emergency services, and that if this measure passed, that it would be under local control. The money would go back to the city where the local folks could decide, and it wouldn't be Sacramento who decided. So after giving them some general information about the measure and what the money could be used for, we re-asked that initial ballot question. And there you could see support jumped up 7 points to 53%, opposition dropped down 5 points to 46%, but given the margin of error of about 5, you're still on the bubble of support. Then, of course, to have a fair and balanced survey, we introduced some critical statements, such as California is overtaxed right now, and we don't need any additional taxes. And as we hear in every government survey, and not unique to Livermore in any way, shape, or form, there's always waste and mismanagement. And if you just sort of did the right thing, you'd have plenty of money to do all the things that would maintain the quality of life of residents in Livermore. And after that, we go back pretty much to where we were on the initial vote at 46% yes, 49% no, and remember, close to a 5% margin of error. So again, very much on the bubble, but that intensity of definitely no is quite high, 36%, compared to the definitely yes at 22%. And so my conclusion here again is that at this time, the measure does not appear to be viable. And of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll open the public comment on this item. Do we have anybody who wishes to address us?
Yes, Mayor, there are 6 requests to speak. The first is from Dana Cavane, followed by Alan Marling and Doug Mann. Donna Cavane, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, City Council members. Donna Cavane. I encourage you to follow the staff's recommendation and do not pursue putting a measure to increase the city's sales tax. This is not the time. Even what seems to be a small increase of 0.5% sales tax within city limits would increase our sales tax from 10.25 to 10.75 and result in our city having one of the highest city's sales taxes in the state. Residents will consider getting services in San Ramon or Tracy, where sales tax is only 8.25. Services such as haircuts, auto repair, garden supplies, restaurants, even buying a new car. All of these items will add up, and it is just a short trip to San Ramon or Tracy. Residents are already struggling because of COVID-related issues to feed their families. They are cutting back wherever they can. We also know that gasoline will go up. It's not your fault, but due to the unfortunate circumstances in Ukraine, prices on bread, potatoes, food, and most certainly gas and gasoline will increase in the coming months. This will become a very sensitive issue. Residents will not look favorably on a city tax increase at this time. So again, I encourage you to follow staff's recommendation and please refrain from putting a city tax increase on the ballot this year. Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Alan Marling, followed by Doug Mann and Alan Heckman. Alan Marling, please unmute yourself.
Mayor and council members, I wish to congratulate you on that recorded approval rating. It's quite high considering that LV PAC board members such as Joan Sepla, owner of The Independent, is spending so much of her wealth and credibility and ink in The Independent trying to snub you with misleading statements because you opposed her whims as far as building construction in downtown. So again, thank you for your work.
Next speaker is Doug Mann, followed by Alan Heckman and Jackie Coda. Doug Mann, please unmute yourself.
Well, City Council, I've got great news for you. You already have most of the money that you need to manage the $30 million annual deficit that we have due to our asset management needs. It's not fiction that you need money. The question is where the money comes from. The only problem is that right now, most of the money that you need is being temporarily threatened by the Valley Link train. There's a lot to cover here, not enough time to do it, but briefly, as many of you may recall, the county tried to raise our sales tax in 2012 and failed. In 2014, they put out Measure BB, which I signed the arguments against, to raise our sales tax by 1/2 cent and maintain the 1/2 cent that was already there. So one cent for transportation needs. Every city got something special in addition to the 40% return that everybody got. And what we were supposed to get was funding for real BART. Now, I knew at that time that BART was not going to come here, but what was really telling is that Measure BB was silent on what would happen to the $400 million if BART did not arrive. And of course, when BART decided they were not going to extend, that money went to ACTC and they were just going to spend it any way they wanted to. Were it not for AB 758, which proved that we could have state legislation redirect money from ACTC to go to something else. Well, I think it's time to consider redirecting it again. And it should go where it was voted by the voters to go, which is Livermore's transportation needs. That's over $17 million a year that we can use. We're already being taxed through sales. And that money is just being, to me, misdirected. And as you heard earlier, it seems like there's quite a bit of interest in having a discussion about Valley Link and whether or not we really should be pursuing it. The money was redirected once. It can be done again. It'll take work. You'll have to legislate and advocate for state legislation to redirect it back to Livermore. We're paying the taxes. We should receive the money. None of it's been spent yet on Valley Link. MTC, as I mentioned before, they've thrown some money at it, but that's their problem. If they want to throw bad money after a project that doesn't happen, or if they want to build it without our tax money, that's up to them. But we shouldn't be paying for Valley Link. We should be paying for our streets.
The next request to speak is from Alan Heckman, followed by Jackie Coda and Don Argula. Alan Heckman, please unmute yourself.
Hello. Yes, I have a concern that we're only seeing a very tiny subset of the survey results conducted by FM3 Research. We just saw a PowerPoint only discussing about 10 to 13 questions. There are, by my count, around 90 questions and another 10 regarding demographics in the actual full tax survey. Some of the questions dealt with a possible quarter-cent sales tax and also a parcel tax. Citizens were also asked questions regarding their opinion of our high tax burden, city's use of COVID money and hurting small businesses, concerns about low-quality, high-density Eden housing, and excessive salaries and pensions of Livermore government employees. How can the city council get proper direction when the poll results have been so heavily censored by Mayor Bob Warner? I asked that the council direct Mayor Bob Warner to release the full detailed poll results from FM3 Research. The city paid these contractors $95,000 to do the survey. And in the interest of full transparency and the fact that it was paid for by taxpayer dollars means we all deserve to see the completed and complete piece of work by these contractors. The rest of the city council should be able to view the full tax survey results to be best able to give staff proper direction in an open, transparent manner, not just Mayor Bob Warner, Debbie Bell, Richard Bernard, and city staff. City Council asks, why are they withholding the full survey results? Thank you.
Next speaker is Jackie Coda, followed by Donna Argula. Jackie Coda, please unmute yourself.
I have to agree with the last two speakers with regard to the fact that the city council has decided to impose or consider imposing a tax on the community, which is penalizing the community instead of actually seeking out funds that are actually assigned and we've already are paying for and that are being held outside of our city. And you haven't pursued that avenue is kind of ridiculous. Once again, it's another example of poor leadership by our council. So again, I encourage you to listen to the citizens of the community who've said that they do not need another tax imposed upon them. Seems like California Democrats consistently, all they do is want to tax us, tax. Or they say it's for the children, just like the parcel tax that they're going to try to reinstate with the school board. They butchered that a couple of years ago and took out the wording, and it now included admin salaries, and the superintendent got a $75,000 raise. It just becomes a slush fund, and you guys are just going to absolutely squander the money on some social program or some study when you actually could be managing the city with that money. So I encourage you to not move forward with another tax upon the citizens. Thank you.
The last request to speak is from Don Argula. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Mayor Warner and City Council members. I'm Dawn Argula, CEO of the Livermore Valley Chamber of Commerce. And I'm also a resident of Livermore since 1985, and I am a member of the city's Community Asset Management Program Outreach Committee. My professional background prior to serving at the Chamber focused on infrastructure, policy, planning, funding, and implementation. Firstly, I applaud the City of Livermore for taking a proactive approach on this issue with the establishment of the Community Asset Program. It's a leader in doing so. And also a special shout out to Debbie Bell and the staff and to the Outreach Committee. Many cities and counties do not even maintain a robust inventory of their assets, never mind laying out a prioritized list of maintenance needs. The importance of this action should not be overlooked by anyone that cares about this community. Well-maintained infrastructure sufficient to support economic activity is the backbone of a healthy economy and is a key responsibility of government at the local, state, and federal levels. Every infrastructure asset, whether it's a road, sidewalk, highway, bridge, or park, is a result of public or private investment built for the purpose of supporting community economic health. And it is reasonable to expect that plans are sufficiently made for responsible maintenance and proper operation of that asset until its retirement or replacement. While this seems practical on the surface, many jurisdictions often do not take proper actions to protect these investments, oftentimes making this the first line item that is deferred when dealing with competing priorities and budget shortfalls. Failing infrastructure, vastly increased costs, and possible harm to the community and environment awaits communities that do not have the foresight to properly plan for their infrastructure needs. Taxes and fees are never popular. However, prudent, targeted, and well-planned investment for critical public needs can be justified. The county and state transportation sales taxes are examples, and the Tri-Valley region has benefited greatly from these sources of funding. The opinion poll and staff recommendations advise against taking action at this time, and the Chamber is not opposed to this. However, we should consider this notice that attention is needed to address this important need. The Chamber looks forward to more updates and progress on this issue. Thank you.
At this time, there are no more requests to speak.
Okay, I'll close public comment on this on 7.1 and bring it back to the council. Any questions, comments? Vice Mayor Bonanno?
Yeah, so I know we already set some aside some funding every year to address asset management, and we've heard also that based on the results of all the analysis and data we've collected, it does not seem adequate in the long term to support the longer term needs. So given the survey results and staff's recommendation, assuming for the moment that we would follow them, what is our go forward strategy? Where do we go from here with asset management? In light of if we were to assume we don't raise additional funds through a measure such as this? Can we just comment a little bit on where we would go from here?
Yeah, I can respond to that. This is Debbie Bell again, management analyst for this program. So you're exactly right. We have discovered through this process of information collection and analysis that the asset management program needs somewhere between $20 million to $40 million per year, depending on if we want to fund every single asset to its fullest function. That would be $40 million. If we focus only on the highest risk items, that would be $20 million a year. This current cycle, we're actually funding our infrastructure at $16 million. We're doing a little bit more this cycle than we have in past. It's typically around $10 million that we spend. So there is a definite delta between what we have and what we need to spend so that we make sure we're taking care of our infrastructure. Like you said, without a new funding source, we need to focus on the money that we have and how to use it the most successfully. So we will, as part of the work plan that you have already approved, we'll continue to focus funding on the highest risk infrastructure. We're going to continue to advance the collection of our asset data across all of our infrastructure classes and work with you and the community to find and implement some cost-effective policies and practices. One of the things in particular, and one of our speakers just, Don Argula, spoke about the CAMP Outreach Committee. So that's our Community Asset Management Program Outreach Committee. I'm going to really work to continue to expand with them our public outreach efforts. So we're going to do education about the variety, quantity, condition, maintenance costs of the community-owned infrastructure. And through this education, we're hoping to create that foundational awareness for our community and then combine that with community input to get the feedback that we all need to help build consensus for difficult future decisions, and especially before our infrastructure fails. So we're going to continue along with the work plan that you have blessed and continue to report back to you as we're making progress.
Okay, real quick follow-up. Thank you for that. And I assume as well, we talked about this at least a year ago. We're going to continue to be looking for other sources of revenue, either state funding, grants, perhaps some federal infrastructure money. That's all still, those are still items that we're planning to pursue?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you very much for the report. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Monroe.
So I have two questions, very different ones. One is one of the questions that was raised by the public speakers had to do with the nature of taxes. And I'm wondering if we could speak to the nature of funding for the city, since the city is just a collection of people. We take care of our house, which is the city. That's where we live. So where do taxes fit into that? Where do we get our money from? I recognize that Doug's up in Orinda, so hopefully somebody else can address that. So that's one question. And second question is, what might we expect to see, assuming we do everything that Debbie, that you've talked about, what could we see in the way of deterioration that might not be maintained? What would be the trajectory going forward without extra funding at some point?
So, council member, this is Mark Roberts, your city manager. I'm going to answer each of those questions in turn. You're aware that the city has a number of sources of income. The two largest, however, are sales tax and property tax. People noted that in Alameda County, our sales tax rate is 10.25%. Of course, the city only gets 1% out of that 10.25. So indeed, that does fund a wide variety of governmental services at the state, regional, county level, in addition to the 1% that goes to the city. On the property tax side, for every dollar property tax, the city gets approximately 16 cents for every dollar. So while indeed the city does essentially have its two largest funding sources from sales tax and property tax, the total amount that is paid by an individual who lives in the city, the vast bulk of those dollars go to support services beyond the city's borders on there. You talked also asked a question about, what is the state of our infrastructure and what is likely to happen. The good news is, as several speakers had noted, is we are out in front of a lot of communities and worrying about this. Infrastructure is most of our infrastructure classes are very long-lived items. And so by starting this process decades before many of our major systems will be in the position of failing, we do have the ability to both change our processes to make sure that we're cost effectively maintaining the highest priority assets, look for other alternatives, and has also been mentioned, use local funds to match regional, state, and federal funds. Many programs explicitly reward communities that set aside money and can spend a portion of their local dollars to match those other funding sources. So overall, we would expect, over years, some of our asset classes would begin to show the wear and tear that's not obvious to the individual at this time. One of the things we're trying to avoid is failure of those assets, because of course it's much more expensive to replace a failed asset than it is to maintain it over time in the proper course of its lifespan. So while this is an important issue, we need to continue to work on it. We do have some time to do that, and we also have some other alternatives. One of the things you asked us to do was explore a wide range of practices, policies, and sources of funding. This is one piece of that, but it's not the only piece. So again, we will continue to work on this on a number of different fronts, and we'll be reporting back to you. Of course, this is one of your annual goals, and so you will be getting an update with the rest of the progress on the rest of your goals later this year, and then all the way until the end of the 2-year period.
Great, thanks. I do have one follow-up on the first question I asked, which is the sales tax that was the subject of the survey. All of that would have gone to the city. None of that would have gone to other sources. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thanks. That's it.
Councilmember Kick.
I think it's been addressed, but I'll just make it even more crystal clear. If you can clarify, this is my assumption, as it is with many things, is fixing something before it's broke cheaper than after it fails?
Yes, is the very short answer. And your asset management group has much longer answers to that. We actually have detailed dollars and cents by asset class. I'll give you a quick example. If it costs 10 cents to do a quick slurry seal on a roadway, that's a very slim. It would then cost essentially roughly 10 times that to do an overlay. And it would be many times that to actually do a reconstruction. So in other words, a few cents of preventative maintenance can save dollars worth of repair and replacement and catastrophic loss.
Yeah, I just want to make that very clear. I don't think anybody is just looking to increase taxes for fun, because every person that's sitting on this council would also be paying those same higher sales taxes. So I understand the results of the survey, but I just want people to keep that in mind, that if you see a leak in your sink, it's generally a good idea to fix it before a pipe bursts. So we will keep doing some digging, and thank you, Debbie, for all the work that you are doing on that.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments and questions. I mean, the whole point of this, as was mentioned, is it's the essence of keeping this city financially strong. And we had an earlier item on the calendar about the OPEB, because that was $100 million liability that we've, by taking conscious action, we've working that down. The other thing that we did many years ago was establish a very robust reserve policy so that we can handle things like the pandemic and other things. And we, after the Great Recession, we built it back up and we're in good financial position there. This is the other major piece that we have to have our eyes wide open on, is that we do have infrastructure and it does need maintaining. I think we saw a pretty spectacular example of the collapse of a bridge recently. So nothing lasts forever. And so the whole point here of what we initiated many years ago is to is to be aware. Now, many other cities are oblivious to it because it's so easy not to deal with it. So that's what we're here about, is we are committed to making the city financially strong, because without the financials, we can't provide the essential services, which are public safety and everything else necessary for a good quality of life. So that's where we're coming from here. I think we also see that without any kind of real trying to influence the opinion or anything, it's just a test, and that the answer is clearly no, there is no appetite for this. And I think that was should be clear from the staff report and the presentation. A couple of other things I want to just mention is that this was a survey to the citizens, because the council does not impose the tax. This is a question of whether the citizens are sufficiently aware and concerned as to whether we're going to pay for this and how. This is no imposition. It's simply, what does the public want to do? And that's what we're listening to. And the other thing we want to point out, that in the survey that was alluded to, there weren't these bizarre questions about Eden housing and everything else. That turns out to be somebody else's survey who happens to run a newspaper. So and then the last thing I want to point out is that it was mentioned that, oh, we have all the money because of Valley Link. Now, our assets go way beyond transportation. So I'm not sure, and I'd ask the city manager this, I don't think the Valley Link funds are fungible to repairing our sewer system, for instance. Am I correct on that?
You are correct on that.
So I think this is a serious matter, and I would just urge everyone who wishes to engage on it fully informed and just be honest about what we're dealing with. So that's what I have to say. Any other Councilmember Carling?
Yeah, I agree with your points, and I'd like to move staff recommendation, which includes no tax initiative on the November ballot.
Okay. We have, I see Councilmember Monroe. You're on mute.
Second that. I was trying to unmute. I second that.
Okay, and I would just want to make sure this is what we have to vote on this, because this was discussion and direction, right?
In this particular case, since the direction is to take no further action, you can either choose to vote on it, or if the item is simply heard, but we wanted to be quite clear about what the outcome of your direction is. So it is, I think, helpful for us to have that on the record.
Okay, we'll always like to put it on the record. So can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Carling,
Aye.
Councilmember Kick,
Aye.
Councilmember Monroe,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bonanno,
Aye.
Mayor Warner.
Aye, passes unanimously that we're not going to do something. So that's interesting. We're now on to item 7.2, the default local campaign contribution limits. Can we have the staff presentation, please?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This is Jason Alcala, your City Attorney. I'll be making the staff presentation for this item this evening. This particular item is for information and provides an update on campaign contribution limits for candidates for mayor and City Council in Livermore. In 2018, the City Council concluded a comprehensive review of Livermore's local campaign regulations and then amended the Livermore Municipal Code to remove the $250 campaign contribution limit. However, after the city eliminated its contribution limits, the state subsequently imposed limits in those cities that do not have local limits. So once the city removed it, the state put it back. Specifically in 2019, the state legislature enacted AB 571 and established a default campaign contribution limit in the amount of $3,000 per election for cities without local campaign limits. The limit mirrored the contribution limits for state, Senate, and Assembly elections. That limit has since been increased by CPI, and the amount has now been increased to $4,900 for elective city offices, that is for mayor and city council. Therefore, commencing with Livermore's 2022 general municipal election, a person will be prohibited from making a contribution to a candidate for elective city office, again, mayor or city council, and a candidate for elective city office is prohibited from accepting a contribution totaling more than $4,900 from a single donor. However, the bill does allow the city to establish a different limit that is more precisely tailored to its local community needs. However, it bears mentioning that if Livermore does establish a different contribution limit locally, then it also needs to consider adopting enforcement standards, including the imposition of administrative, civil, or criminal penalties for violations. However, absent a local limit, if the state's limits do apply as a default, the Fair Political Practices Commission is the one who will be responsible for administration and enforcement of those contribution limits. Again, this is an informational item to advise you that the law regarding campaign contribution limits for city offices, again, mayor and city council, are no longer unlimited and now limited to $4,900 per candidate per contributor per election. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Just saw in a magazine or a ad for a little button you can have so it'll do your mute, so you don't have to get your mouse to the right screen to unmute. But I'll go to public comment on this item before we come back to the council. Do we have anybody who wishes to address us on this?
Yes, Mayor, there is one request to speak. Ellen Marling, please unmute yourself.
Council members and Mayor. Well, this is interesting. I'm not sure how much good a modifying this is going to do when it seems like most of the problem in Livermore appears to be special interest groups funded by LV PAC board members printing misleading attack ads in the Independent. And I'm not sure how much it will good to limit or raise or decrease the limit for personal contributions if PACs can still spend infinite money on mailers and newspaper ads. Perhaps that's a greater problem with American democracy. Anyways, thank you for your time.
There are no more requests to speak.
Okay, I'll close public comment on this item and go to Councilmember Kick.
My question is actually related to what this speaker said. Can you clarify that this is personal contributions and that does not apply to political action committees, or does it?
So it depends on where the contribution is made. If a PAC or an independent expenditure committee were to make a contribution to a candidate, it would be subject to these limits. If they did make a contribution to the candidate, I would encourage them to touch bases with the FPPC. It does not look like this law applies to that type of contribution, whether it's just to them and themselves. But the FPPC will be the ultimate arbiter since they're in charge of enforcing the limits I just mentioned.
And where else would they be giving other than a candidate? Would it be towards a measure or?
Towards a measure, or if a donor were to make a contribution not to a candidate, but rather to the Independent Expenditure Committee directly.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that clarification.
Certainly.
Yeah, the point is contribution limits to candidates are kind of absurd in the context of, we know we have local PACs that have spent millions. So it's I don't think anybody's going to be, so it just strikes me, we just leave it alone. Councilmember Monroe.
Just want to thank you for the report. I would agree that we just leave it alone. It's, yeah, it is what it is. But I appreciate the information. Thank you.
So, yeah, and I thank you for keeping us apprised of state law. And, you know, we took the limit off because of the absurdity of having one. Now the state law has come in. So I think the answer is we'll just do nothing here. So any other comments? Okay, I guess we're going to be accused of the do nothing council tonight. So we don't need any vote or anything on this one, right? You're good with us saying we're not doing anything?
That is correct. This is just for information.
Okay, we don't really have to punctuate it with a vote. Okay. So, all right, we're done with 7.2 and we're on to 8.0, which is council committee reports and matters initiated by the city manager, city attorney, staff, and council members. I'll start with Councilmember Kick.
Yes. Like I said, I know there's some irony in the fact that I agreed that we should do those forms. However, I have a job now, other than this. It's become more difficult. So I will fill you in here to have my obligation fulfilled, that I told the community what I'm doing. The Tri-Valley Transportation Commission is still working on their recommendation for what the communication or transportation fees will be and how they will affect our cities. The process has been pushed back a bit, but it will come to us as a full council to adopt, and each of our cities will implement those fees on our own. So just keep an eye on that. And that's the biggest thing going on in my world right now. So I'll keep you updated as soon as it's ready to come back to all of y'all. And I have no matters initiated. However, I'm excited to see that East Avenue is moving forward. And so I guess this is just a little open call to say, hey, people, if you're still watching, go participate in those feedback meetings. Because I was just riding on East today with my children, and it'll be great if we can get some more people's opinion on what it's like to ride there. So that is all.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Carling.
Yes, thanks. In addition to my report, I want to make a couple of points. One is on February 18th, I had the opportunity of traveling around the city with a couple of people that work for Open Heart Kitchen. They gave me another view of the homeless in our city. I met and spoke with 16 different people in various locations throughout the city, and I must say that I was again moved by the need out there of some of our unsheltered, and it really is heartbreaking to see some of these folks out there. And one of my questions that I ask everybody, two questions. One is, what's their name? First name only, usually. And then secondly, where are they from? And every one of the 16 is from Livermore. So I know that we've had people that claim that because of the services that Livermore provides, other communities are sending their homeless to us. Well, that's certainly not my experience. And again, that point of view was reinforced on this latest visit when I asked every one of them where are they from, and the answer is Livermore. on the 27th, just yesterday, my wife and I was invited to an Arrow of Light celebration or ceremony with the Cub Pack 914, or the Mighty 914 as they call themselves. And my wife was joined me, and it was a great celebration to see 5 boys be recognized with the Arrow of Light as they move on to Boy Scouts. They formed the Cub Pack was named Ninja Snakes. So I thought that was very cute. The whole evening was really quite memorable. Having been a Cub Scout once upon a time years ago myself, it brought back a lot of fond memories of not only when I was in Cubs, but also my own son, our own sons and Boy Scouts. So it was a great celebration. And the Mighty 914 is a terrific Cub Scout pack. And thanks for the opportunity participating in that kind of activity through the city. That's it for me. Thanks.
What was your pack name?
Well, back then we had things like wolves and tigers and lions, but nothing like these kids come up with these days. I think the Golden Owls was one of the one of the patrol names that I had when I was in Boy Scouts.
That was just yesterday, right?
Yeah.
That you were the Boy Scout, yeah. Right. So the Councilmember Monroe.
So I went and checked I thought I might talk about some of the stuff I did enter in earlier, but I think it'll stand on its own. I did want to go back to one of the speakers who suggested that we comment on the Russia-Ukraine invasion, in particular, our sister city. And I wanted to respond to that in one of the things we've done as a city is to be very clear about sticking within areas that we have some control over. I get called out on that on occasion, so I find it a little ironic that I'm mentioning it now, but I do feel that this is an area where the people of our sister city don't have a whole lot to do with that invasion any more than we would as residents of Livermore in, God forbid, a similar situation. So I would not be in favor of that. And nor would I be in favor of anything that would, again, comment on issues that we really have no control over. But we do have control over some things. And what I would suggest, if people care about this issue, is find places to donate, write letters, do those things that you as individuals believe will make a difference in individual people's lives. So that would be my response to that public comment. And that's really all I have for this.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Bonanno.
Yeah, I'll just mention one thing. I have other things in my supplemental report, but the one I wanted to mention was the Livermore Amador Valley Water Management Agency meeting that Councilmember Carling and I attended last week. Just for information for the council and others here, an informational item was brought to us related to the sewer extension that would be voted on by the voting members of Livermore, even though it would be a county extension into the county, unincorporated county area. Just to let you know, it was received by the LAVMA board. It was just an informational report. I think no one expressed any strong feelings, certainly no strong feelings against. And I think what the board agreed to do was the attorney for LAVMA had proposed a set of follow-up questions, mostly just informational questions that would come back to Livermore to be answered, and they would be delivered back. Answers would be delivered back to us. And the board understands that it would be only their approval would be required only after and if the voters agreed to move forward with the sewer extension. So I just wanted to throw that in there since I know we are interested in that as a city. I don't know if Councilmember Carling has anything to add to that, but I wanted to make you all aware of it. And that's all I have.
Okay, and with respect to the sewer extension, you mentioned there isn't any thought that that would be a tax or anything like that on the city, right?
That, I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, it was a question about who would pay for it. And it was made very clear that it would not be taxpayer money that would be used to make that sewer extension into the city, into the unincorporated areas from the city utility.
Okay.
Would be paid by users.
Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay, I've got my report filled out there. I want to mention two things. Follow on from what I said last time was we did have a meeting through the Alameda County mayors and the supervisors, and we're getting alignment on the framework for dealing with homelessness. And the whole idea is that all the different entities that have got programs agree on how to approach this and how to direct funding in a coordinated way. There'll still be some individual area flexibility, but that's a major step forward, a ways to go to continue to get details and to work it all through, but good progress. And the other item I mentioned, I was concerned about the ambulance service in the Tri-Valley. And in the last, well, in January, the ambulance service actually met the metrics. And we need to understand exactly how that was done. So that's being looked at. I think there is still ongoing concern as to whether our service is sufficient or not, and we'll be following up on that. So that's all I have. And so now I'm going to adjourn to a special closed session meeting on March 1st. I think that's tomorrow, regarding the city manager recruitment. It'll be at 5 o'clock, and it'll be held virtually using Zoom. So thank you. We're adjourned. Good night.
Night. Thank you.